also know that some of these trends were set in motion well before that. So a lot of our conversations today are going to talk about labor markets and educational institutions, as well as building talent pipelines. So I wanted to open with a broad question. As companies are, as we're seeing these labor shortages and transitions in the workplace, I'd like to hear from our panelists a little bit about how they are seeing industries adapt to the workforce shortages, and what the ramifications of these adaptations are on the workforce and specific roles within companies. So for example, as we are seeing workforce shortages, there's technological adaptation that is disrupting certain jobs. We're looking at companies are looking at internal efficiencies and changing the nature of certain jobs to address the workforce shortages. To the panelists, what jobs or roles do you see being most impacted by the adjustments that are happening in the industry? And in what ways are our institutions responding to these adaptations? I'll begin with Fred, since you're right next to me.
Okay. Well, first of all, when we reflect, listening to the mayor, as we reflect, we're a county college. Some are here. We're positioned literally in the middle between the high school population or the K-12 population and the higher education, in which we have a premier partner at the university. So we're kind of in the middle that I think we get the opportunity to watch the traffic. We really can see it from both ends. The type of jobs I would leave to the industry to discuss. Later, my one question will be with regard to the Inspira relationship, which I believe, to me, in participating here, is really the answer to our entire perspective of the change. Yes, we were heading in this direction. Pandemic was the accelerant that literally put steroidal growth on it. So what we're seeing in our sector is the population coming up, K-12, and the population that we have, and then it's, interest in going on, is pretty much, I believe, is crippled to the point that the pandemic just went in and squashed it. So now what we have to do, and what we're doing, and later to your question for me specifically, is finding partners in industry. I use the analogy of the dog to our staff, the tail and the dog. Education always thought it was the dog wagging industry and business, which was the tail. We believe this is now gone, and it should be the reverse. So we went to industry and we said, what is it you need for the workforce that you're experiencing now? Recognizing the qualitative, quantitative, less of them, and the qualitative aspect of how they're prepared. It's different. So quickly, for my 2 seconds in this volley, we're going to preach today this idea that the reversal of relationship now is that business and industry must be the leader of the conversation. Chambers of commerce, workforce development, rooms like this. If you have a business, you're going to have to go to I believe you're going to have to go to a higher ed entity and seek marriage. And in doing so, it's not a handshake anymore. It's literally entrenched, so that the workforce dictates the rules of engagement and the credentialing of the people. That's how we work. And once you have that understanding, it's the job of education to adapt to the workforce in that nature of training. Forget what we've been doing for 50 years to a century and change it, which is hard because we're silo driven between labor and education. We don't talk. We have lunch and breakfast, but we don't talk. So later we'll speak about the idea you want me to answer, and I apologize if I'm taking more than my 30 seconds on this. But bottom line, it's as an athlete, former athlete, listening to the mayor, we are in the fourth quarter, we're down 10, and you're looking for the last gasp. So post-pandemic is to businesses, you are not going to survive unless education responds. And education has to be a widespread issue of, in our arena, technicians, entry level, as well as sending them on to research universities for that completion. We need a workforce of career tech as much as we need a workforce that's driving into health and business and finance and other. Balance the ship, listen to those who have need, and you do. Every day we hear. We then respond, we design a research program, and we have to deliver. I'd like to touch it later about Inspira, but I'll pass to my colleagues. I'm sorry if I took too long.
Thanks, Fred. That was actually I think a perfect segue into our role in higher education, and for industry to survive higher ed needs to adapt and survive. And I think our days of sitting back and waiting for the students to come to us and preparing them the way we want to prepare them, and then you take them and do what you want, that's over. We have to prepare your workforce to be ready from day one. We have to look at alternate pathways through the higher ed. We have to look at different ways of credentialing our students, and we have to see what works for them to learn, when they want, where they want, how they want, and most importantly, having them prepared to go to work for you. So our whole model is changing. You know, I can think of, going to the mayor's comments about the new Camden High School. We're actively engaged with the superintendent McCombs on designing the curriculum, designing pathways so that the students walk out of there ready to go to a 2-year school, to go to a 4-year school, to go straight into the workforce. And that's important. And we have to be at the table for those discussions, because I think the days of a student walking out of high school and making the decision, am I gonna go to work and make a career, or am I gonna go to college and get educated and make a career, is over. We have to find ways to do both. We have to find ways for them to stack the credentials. That's one of the reasons we set forth the partnership we have with Rowan College of South Jersey and Rowan College of Burlington County 6-7 years ago, was to provide the way to train students to meet employers' needs, to be listening to you, to get ahead of the curve. I look at 2 areas of job growth that are hitting South Jersey. They're going to be big for us: wind energy and cannabis. And 5-6 years ago, we sat down and we said, what are the credentials that are going to be needed? These are coming. What are the skills? How do we make sure that when the employers and the industry wants to be here, how are we training the students? I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that we've done that shows how we're shifting in higher ed is that Rowan and RCSJ, we work with the Department of Labor, we work with the trade industries, and now we have a apprenticeship program in cannabis retail. And forget what your opinions are on cannabis. It's like it or not, it's coming. And it's going to be a big industry that's going to make the mark. And it's our job to train the workforce. Same thing with wind energy. We're ahead of the game. Students could go to RCSJ, get a credential, go to work, finish their degree up at Rowan. So these are the pathways that we need to be doing, in addition to what we already do, training engineers and scientists and leaders in healthcare. And before I turn it over, I think healthcare is an area that we all need to be involved. We all need to be training that next workforce. The pandemic hit us hard. It drove a lot of our healthcare workers out. There was already a shortage, and now we need to think bigger. And a great example for that for us is our partnership with Virtua, which happened very rapidly during the pandemic, and I think is going to be transformational for both organizations, creating an entire new college dedicated towards training more doctors, more healthcare professionals, bringing on new programs, not just with Rowan doing it, but Rowan working with its county college partnerships. And we're excited bringing on new programs. We'll be starting a new 4-year nursing program in addition to our 3+1 programs we already offer. We'll be bringing on programs in physician assistants, respiratory therapists. So we listened to our industry partners, our healthcare partners, saying, what do you need? And I think all of our industries need to come forward, tell us what do you need? How can we help you? And between our high schools, trade schools, county colleges, and 4-year institutions, we can help you fill your workforce. So.
Thank you. Dr. Hancock.
So like Thomas Edison is on. You're good. Thomas Edison is in a unique spot in New Jersey. For folks who aren't familiar with it, we were founded about 50 years ago to fill in the gaps. And it's a sketchy economic model, and I'll get into that in a second, but it was really designed to say, what about the people who do go right into the workforce? What about the people who maybe start school and stop out? How do we keep them on the track with the real focus around, we saw this in the military when people would transfer and keep having to be set back, and some credit would be accepted, some evaluation of military credit would be accepted. So Edison was formed by, I think, some pretty smart people in the 70s to say, let's make sure in New Jersey that we keep those people who go straight to work, we keep them moving forward. And we make sure that we're constantly opening doors. I don't have the tail on the dog so much, but I always talk about stairwells. Our students are in stairwells, and Thomas Edison's job is to make sure we're right in front of them. So we always get them the next credential. We award, we honor the credit that they have to make sure the door opens like right before they get to it. So there's a number of moves around to hire people. I know folks are familiar with a group we partner with called 110. Their goal is to hire 1 million non-degreed Black talent into good family paying jobs in 10 years. If you do the math, that makes me sweat and I'm pretty aggressive. But then our idea with them is saying, okay, now how do we make sure that those people can keep moving up? And that's normally where a degree comes from. Last year, we gave away over 66,000 credits from work-based learning. And this is where the model is sketchy. If you do the math on that, that means Thomas Edison said, hey, $25 million in tuition revenue. Let's not take that. Let's go ahead and award the credit because we know the people have done the learning. They know it. Our average student is 35, a very different age group than the person coming straight in. We have students in every county in New Jersey. And I want to repeat what we've said repeatedly on the relationship from industry and education. It's across the board. It's from high schools, it's community colleges, it's four-year research institutions, it's institutions like Thomas Edison that are very, very career and practitioner based, making sure that we're linked in. There's about 39 million people in the US that have some credit, no credential. That's what do employers do with that? We have to be working more closely with industry and have tough conversations. Tell us what you need. How do we get it? And not just, I think any president will say, when you talk to somebody in a company, you go to the hiring manager, they talk skills. Kind of what's the student's major? You talk to the CEO and they say, we're missing soft skills. We're missing critical thinking. We're missing fuzzy logic. We're missing analytics. They go more for the general ed, liberal studies, liberal arts approach. At institutions, we've got to figure out how to get that to everybody in a timely manner. And for Thomas Edison, we have to do it while the train's running down the runway, or train's going down the runway, that's about right in Thomas Edison. But while the plane's going down the runway, and they're trying to take care of kids, they're trying to take care of aging family members, they're trying to move on the job and stay competitive. And we've got to keep saying, what's that credential you need to have to give you value in the marketplace? So it's a dynamic, exciting time these days. Say not for the faint of heart, as I think my colleagues would agree.
Mr. Heath, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Monica, for the question as well. And it's interesting that I'm the last person to speak after the higher education folks, because I represent business and represent organizations, particularly nonprofit healthcare in this region. But what's interesting is that when I came on board, I'm relatively new as the CEO at Samaritan. When I came on board, I thought about two things that really drives what we do. It's our optimizing our services and our technology, and it's our affiliations and partnerships. The way we're successful is through our affiliations and partnerships. And so when we look at the employees that we have, our employees come to us needing a certification or a license because we're a healthcare organization. So we need RNs, we need social workers, home health aides. But what we do realize is that we have some folks who come to us who may have the experience, but need deeper certification. And so when we saw this workforce shortage coming about, what we decided to do was partner with other organizations like Rowan, like I think it's Camden Works, and others, so that we could train our individuals and then bring them on and give people an opportunity. Because we do have some people who have had another career before they've joined us. But our business is different than most businesses, where when folks went home during the pandemic, we didn't. And so we have to figure out, how do we keep providing care to the people of our community? And so with our high touch, high care environment, what we wanted to do is to ensure that we had the right technology to be able to do that. We did that through telemedicine and telehealth. And we did that by optimizing our technology, getting the right tools that would somehow speak to each other so that we could provide that kind of care that was needed for our community. And you'll hear later, what we've talked about, or what we've created, is an institute to help us with education, research, and innovation but it's through a partnership with Roy in particular, and then our affiliations with our other healthcare partners in the region.
Great, thank you. So common theme as we hear, there is a desire both ways and an interest and strong track record of partnerships already. And I think we'll do a little bit more deep dive with some of the next questions, which are more individually tailored. So I'll begin with Dr. Keating. Last year, there was a premier partnership that was announced with Inspira Health to educate and retain future healthcare professionals. We'd love to learn a little bit more about that partnership and how it's helping the organization, but also what are other such partnerships that might be in the horizon for you?
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to go back and say this is my 2 cents for the whole day. Rip this page. I'm going to say rip this page out of our book, and I would offer it as a playbook to any business. So Amy Mansue, the head of the CEO, who many of you know, came to me one day, and she and I went in a room and sat down and talked. And she said, "Look, I'm in healthcare. I'm taking over this hospital system, and I have a need. You fill in the blank, health, and name it, and name it." Prior to that conversation, right before the pandemic, actually a few years, some of my staff and I entertained a conversation with the head of respiratory therapy of Inspira Hospital. He came to me and he said that we have only X number of respiratory therapists coming through and working in our system. Why is this a key point example, as I offer it to any CEO or any business person, is you all have a need of a critical area. And your question is, where are you going to get it? We tried to answer that quickly. When I sat with Frank Bender and we talked about this, I was then introduced to Annalise McMenamin, who's here, HR director. We now have the program called HR Direct, and I'll close on that point. Inspira sat there and talked to me about a lack of respiratory therapists in Southern New Jersey. Then this thing called a pandemic hit. And oh my, we don't have a school that develops respiratory therapists or provides them in our region. I think only a few, if any, in our state. And we are now in a virus of a pulmonary disease that is killing record numbers of Americans, and we have no response, let alone therapists to treat these people. And it's still going on today. COVID is still here. So my point to this is I got a big tattoo right on the middle of my forehead that said, go back to that day you sat there and a business came in your door, sat you down and said, we need this, and we need it critically before we put gasoline on that fire. Now, as a result of that conversation, initially, we talked to our partner, the BSRT, the Bachelor of Science in Respiratory Therapy, is now a reality through us to them. We have solved this problem, but what that means to me and hopefully to you is we must preemptively go in a room between business leaders. I love HR directors. I actually get the most advice, well, pardon my staff, the most advice I get from an HR director who comes in and says, Fred, look at this, my business, in this case, it's health, or in my opinion, cannabis, yes, wind, yes, we're players too. But selfishly, we lean toward health. And in doing so, found a partner in Inspira that said, let's talk. So quickly, what are the components of that relationship? The most important is what we call HR Direct, to the points made by Thomas Edison and others. This workforce that's out there with some college, some training, they don't know what to do with it. Stop outs in our vocabulary, that we have to find a way, and New Jersey's trying to get them back, to be continued. While we try, we have to look at traditional individuals coming up, 18-year-old high school. First of all, quantitatively, as I said earlier, there's less of them. Qualitatively, inside that less of them is even a limitation through 2 years of pandemic education in their lap, and now you got what you got. So we're struggling, and you are struggling in your industry. So when these two come together and these two wires connect, the idea was for Inspira was our entire workforce at Inspira now has to have the opportunity to go back to school and advance their education, pathway driven. And in doing so, it doesn't cost them anything. It's a perk of employment, which back in my day was part of the deal, which fell away when businesses stepped away from paying for the advancement of the education of their workforce. Recession kind of crushed it. So with this rethinking of that, now you can become a nurse for nothing. And maybe you should become a teacher for nothing. You should become a policeman for nothing. That we take away the barrier of cost, completely take it away. How? We reduce to get the student body. They pay in as an employer and they contribute to, Most importantly, it's driven by HR or it's pathway driven. The hundreds of people since we merged with Inspira under this one consideration already now have come into the college and are pursuing education. We can only take them so far, then we turn them over. But the point we're making is every employee now knows you have a chance to re-enter. So this idea of career path and ladder climb, before we get to unemployed, underemployed, we're looking at now military and prison for individuals coming out, entering into our workforce that you are going to have to, and we are going to have to help you educate because we don't have a workforce without this. So it's a different way of thinking it. The second consideration is the business gave us a multi-million-dollar, as did Virtua here, with the understanding that research and development was part of the deal, prong two, meaning half that money goes to people to be tuition relief to come into the arena of health. And the other half of it goes to, we need respiratory therapists, we need R&D, we have to develop the program and the accreditation. We put that money toward that. You have to put skin in our game. So by doing that with Inspira, we are now developing surgical technicians, medical techs, biotechs. The technician is the word of the day. That level of employment that's not quite up here, but not quite down there. And I'm proud to say that the first graduate of this relationship with Inspira was a gentleman in the custodial division that needed a GED. We can do that too. So we got that individual the GED for the high school requirement to even be employed by them, up to nursing and or therapist. So my point in the relationship with Inspira in summary is that this was a marriage. Amy and I joked and I said, you know, we need to go to the altar. This can't be an engagement. It's got to be a marriage. And in doing so, it is that way. This is what I would preach to those of you in business. You have to come to the altar and we have to be there to receive you and say yes as well. And in doing it, we educate not what we think you need, but you tell us you need. In finance, we're doing it in business now. We have another partnership coming up to be announced in a week or two from Ascenda Behavioral Health. South Jersey, Anthony Fabio, CEO, visionary like Amy, came in and said, Fred, I need 100 social workers. Our clinical base, the behavioral health of our society is broken. It's broken. We need people to help people, Mayor, people to help people. And in doing that, we don't have the people to do it. So they came to us and said, hey, that Inspira thing that you did, that's pretty unique. Can we do it? Yes. Okay. Research development, School of Social Work. Now we're getting into drug and alcohol, pain management with the Rowan School of Medicine on our campus. We're opening up the arena for people to help people. Back to the mayor's point. And with that in mind now, we've got another premier partner. We call them premier partners. And we are soon to announce another one with Ray Rastelli, with Rastelli Food. Okay. You know, food science. I need people on the floor. They're not cutting that meat and veal with a knife as much as they are with a computer. And they need to know the technology of the computer and the machine in order to process the product. Before I get to logistics, transportation, and moving my product all over the world. Hey, can we get in that? Food science. So when you talk about emerging industry, you're all emerging industries. If you want to survive, you're going to need a workforce. We don't have it. We don't have it. And we have a behavioral issue that's pounding down on top of the quality of our students because many of them are dropping out. Because
you.
the generation right now, I know.
Thank you, Fred.
Time
Yes,
out.
we got to keep moving. Yes. I am going to jump the other
The
end.
light went red.
Yeah.
I didn't see the light.
All right. I will jump to Philip. You know, at Rutgers Camden, we've really every aspect of what we do is steeped in our mission and values. And what really drew me to your institute of education, research, and innovation is it is steeped in Samaritan's values and mission. So share with us a little bit about that institute and its objectives and how it's helping with the workforce development.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Samaritan has always been focused on education and advocacy. We have our Institute for Education, Research, and Innovation. And actually this past year, when our CEO retired, we named the Institute in honor of her. So now it's called the Mary Ann Boccalini Institute for Education, Research, and Innovation. Because part of her vision and part of our vision is to ensure that we're providing education not only to our employees, but also to the community. We have a number of partnerships that we have actually with Rowan University School of Business, as well as the Rowan School of Osteopathic Medicine, in which we started over 10 years ago, the first fellowship in palliative medicine. And we also have business school students who are partnering with us in helping us advance our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives as well. So that's part of what the Institute does on the education side. On the research side, what we felt was very important, even though we've been in this community since 1980, we've been 43 years in our community. What was important was that we weren't just patting ourselves on the back saying we do a good job, but we wanted to make sure that we had peer-reviewed research that said, hey, you guys are doing an amazing job. And so we have articles. This month, our first peer-reviewed article is going out into the Journal of Hospice and Palliative Nursing. And then we have another article that's going out into the Journal of Interdisciplinary Education and Practice, because it's important to understand the role that we play in our community, where people are at the most vulnerable parts or times in their lives that they need someone to come alongside them. And that's what we do. But we don't just do it on the hospice side. We've expanded services where we now, in addition to our palliative medicine practice, in which we can provide care inpatient in the hospital setting and outpatient in their home setting, we also have home visit physicians. Yes, we do doctors' visits in the homes again. And so we're excited about that. That's helping us to reach more people in more ways outside of just hospice care. And then we continue to provide that support with other organizations such as the Medical Society of New Jersey, such as the New Jersey Hospital Association and the Goals of Care Coalition. These conversations may sound very complex and very difficult, and those are uncomfortable conversations. I don't want to have those, but we have those conversations when it's prenatal care. We have those conversations when you're making decisions to buy a house. So we need to start having those conversations at end of life as well, because all of us are getting older, and that's a date that most of us don't want to discuss. But it is important. And I think that those are ways in which the Institute helps. And then finally, one of the things, and it's interesting, Dr. Keating, what you were saying about the partnerships with Inspira and Ascenda. One of the things that we're doing is we have people who come to us and they say, I'm a home health aide, but I want to be an RN. How do I get there? Well, we can say, well, we have our tuition reimbursement program, but how do we accelerate that? We do that training, we identify individuals, and we can't identify every individual. So this is a special selection of an individual or two that we can carry through so that the CNAs can become RNs. And we are proud to say that we have a couple of folks who have gone through our program. They've become RNs, and they're now working in that capacity, as opposed to the capacity that they came in under. And then we have other individuals who may have come in as a CNA, and we try to create the pathways that will allow them to seek other opportunities. We have an individual who started as a home health aide. She now works in our human resources department, because that was her desire, and she has a college degree as well. So creating new opportunities, new and innovative ideas, and the Institute allows us to do that. And hopefully this year we'll be able to do even more partnerships and more innovative things.
And I've been given the 5-minute signal from Ryan, so I do want to shift a little bit. Meredith, a question for you. You referred to 110 and how that's kind of taking jobs and with a goal of putting a million Black workers into the workforce with living wages. We're also seeing at the same time that a lot of state governments like Maryland and recently Pennsylvania have actually taken some of their jobs and removed college requirements from them. And that I believe, as in Pennsylvania, there's about 65,000 jobs now with the state government, which do not now require a college degree. In higher education, it's kind of shaken us up a little bit. Some see it as a positive thing, some see it not as a positive thing. I wanted to get your take on it, especially with the adult learners and the student body that your institution serves.
Certainly, it's a disruptive time in higher education. It's a disruptive time in hiring. We are seeing a tremendous number of employers and states say, do we need the degree? Are we limiting ourselves too much for some of these jobs? Maryland, I'd like to say, got rid of the degree, yet upped their funding for higher ed. So it was a great combination to say, we believe that you can be a productive worker, but we also believe in the long-term value of higher ed. But we're in this weird shift right now. I don't know how many people have heard of Chat GPT.
Oh, yes.
What that has done to education is out of this world. For those who have not, when you're free, go Google Chat GPT. It's an AI tool that industry is so excited about because they can find answers immediately. They can save so much time in doing their work. And it's that same type of collaboration that we value in industry that we don't value in higher ed. It's that artificial intelligence. We do not value that in higher ed. So for us to get in sync with these now students that are going directly into the workforce and are starting to then build their education, higher ed, we're going to have to change the mold and say it's not the sage on the stage. And we've been saying this for 50 years, but we haven't moved far enough to it. Because when you start looking at that new demographic, that new working student, they come in and say, what do you mean I can't go to resources? Nowhere on my job would they say, we value you absolutely not collaborating, not validating with outside resources, not using technology. And so they're coming at us and saying, wait a minute, you're not in sync at all. The skills you're trying to teach me will not make me successful on the job. And that's a challenge for higher ed. So it's not an answer, but it's the move that working with industry, working in higher ed, we should not expect our students to be successful in a vacuum because that is not how this world works. And if you go out now, I can speak to my traditional colleagues. I'm sure you're spending a lot of time figuring out how to deal with AI now and who's doing the learning. And we as institutions and employers have to say, where does it matter? How do we build in the pieces we need? How do we keep the learning going? I will add one thing that I'm starting to hear from employers, and 110, by the way, was founded out, Merck was one of the big starters in this. But I'm hearing from employers now who say, we want to promote people. They're short on communication skills. They're short on critical thinking. And so again, that we just got to make sure we're not shutting the door on this population who put trust in the system, went straight to work, and then said, wait a minute, now I can't move. So we have to work collaboratively to say, keep people moving up. Let's make all people good New Jersey taxpayers and keep our system strong, because we won't do it if we don't come together during this huge time of disruption.
Great. I'm going to wrap up with my final question, which really brings this panel together, is what makes for, if you can each speak to one thing that makes for a successful university and corporate partnership, and if you can keep your comments to about 45 seconds at the most. One thing that makes university and corporate partnerships work. And we'll begin with them.
Yeah, I'll take Fred's 45 seconds anyway.
As long as he's giving it to you.
I defer to the senator from Rowan.
You know what? Yeah, I'll tell you what makes these partnerships work is because if you heard every single one of Fred's comments was start with industry, finish with Rowan, and him as the intermediary. And I can tell you every single one. He talked about respiratory therapy. That, you know, that's actually the final accreditation visit is today. So the students will be enrolled in the fall. They're visiting right now. That partnership, Rowan, RCSJ, Virtua, Inspira, Jefferson, Cooper, competitors, right? Not in that world. We're all working together to put each other in the seat. Same thing. You could talk Ascenda, RCSJ, Rowan School of Social Work. Just these ideas come and we work together. And when you have partnerships like that, it becomes very easy when the provost at one university can finish the sentence for the president from the county college. That shows you these partnerships work, and we're ready to go. And I'll give one more example of a great partnership that I think is being driven by industry and something we're extremely proud of. And I forgot I shouldn't be preaching this today, but you know we're excited to be opening in how many months? 18 months. The first school of veterinary medicine, much long needed in the state of New Jersey. And we forget we're still a pretty big agriculture and animal state. And yet, a state our size, we've been exporting our students to every other state in the US to get, and out of the US to get their degrees in veterinary medicine. And then we have no veterinary technicians, we have no veterinarians, we have no longer the mom and pop small corner vets. So between the industry, between the state, between the county colleges, between the county shelters and clinics, we all banded together, and in less than 2 years, we're going to have a beautiful new School of Veterinary Medicine that's going to train the vets for our region. It's going to train the folks with the business skills to support this industry in the region, and it's going to train the veterinary technicians at our 2-year schools to support these clinics. So those are how partnership work.
So.
People get the
driving
ideas and go.
industry to the door, build an ecosystem, Meredith.
I would say, just as the mayor shared what a plethora of opportunities around career industry we have in Southern New Jersey, there's a plethora of academic opportunities, from college credit, community colleges, workforce development, one-stop shops, research universities. It's the ongoing communication with industry and the honest feedback. The other piece is, if it's not working, don't just shut down. Go back and say, hey, wait, we're still missing something in the skill set we need. We're still, go into that room, shut the door and have the conversation. Keep the communications going. But I would push, as I look around this room, there's a lot of institutions, there's a lot of people who are on workforce development. You're rich, Southern New Jersey. It's a resource I'm not sure you fully appreciate.
Philip, will end with you.
And with 5 seconds, I'll say intentional collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And with that, I don't think I could have said it any better. Intentional collaboration. This is a great place. Thank you, Invest South Jersey and Capital Analytics, for this. And we look forward to the next panel.
I got it.
Okay, great. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today for this panel discussion. I think it's particularly relevant, especially after Fed Chair Powell and his announcement yesterday. So we're looking forward to diving right in. This first question goes for everyone. So whoever would like to take start can. The last 2 years or so, we've seen business conducted at a breakneck pace with almost insurmountable demand across a variety of sectors. Now there's talk of a correction, how we can contextualize today's current environment when looking at the last 2 years, and why does that matter when people are talking about a potential economic downturn?
So let me kick that off. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see some great faces. I want to just start with acknowledging Invest and what a great job you all do of putting everybody in the room. So let's just give them a minute round of applause. So thank you for that. Let's take a step backwards and think about COVID as it relates to that question. Generally speaking, you might summarize the business climate. And I know these guys are going to build onto this. We've seen 10 years worth of progress in a 2-year period of time. So I think it's important, right, to take a step back and understand that a lot of the landscape's changed, but a lot of the landscape has just simply given more choices and more tools. And now we have to be very purposeful and deliberate to evaluate what those tools mean, how they get used, what's worked well, and do more of it, and what hasn't worked well, and either make it better or move along past it. So I think that's probably the main issue economically and in the business climate. And I think everybody would be worthwhile to just take a pause and think about that for a second. It's a big pendulum, and 10 years worth of progress in 2 years is a lot to digest.
Thanks, Albert. Thanks, everyone. Did anyone say happy Groundhog Day yet? It's all shadow. Bad. 6 more weeks. 6 more weeks. Bad news for everybody. I'd say everything else that is right. I think technology, we've seen that move forward a bit. So looking at the past 2 years, I'd agree with that. We've seen it in the banking industry for sure, with the advent of, with the increased adoption of mobile technology and that type of thing. But what I tell you in the context of, a potential recession, I think you also have to look at the financial impact over the last 2 years. We've seen companies' balance sheets get better than they had been, really ever. We've seen consumer households get stronger than they had been. We have one of the strongest unemployment or employment markets that we've seen in history, and particularly here in New Jersey, some of the lowest unemployment we've seen on record. So what does that all that mean in the context of a recession? Could we see economic slowdown? Potentially, yes. But where we're seeing it is in goods, the goods inflation, right? That's really what's been persistent. Wage inflation, I'm sorry, goods inflation is correcting, but we see wage inflation that's persistent. So what does that mean? Households are stronger, the employment market stronger. So with all those components, you could potentially see strong balance sheets, strong consumers, strong unemployment, and then potentially a mild recession. All that could be fine, but then households and companies would weather that okay.
So, yeah, I would agree. I'll look at it from a slightly different angle. So I would say while the progress has been made, the last 2 to 3 years, it's been about adjustment and a little bit of survival of our businesses through the pandemic. There was a small degree for some industries and some businesses that still hold a little bit true today. I know they just talked about it up here on this panel, labor shortages and the related high cost of that labor. It still remains an issue for some of the businesses that I work with. Many of us focused on keeping our doors open during PPP and figuring out how to navigate the ever moving goalposts of that forgiveness piece. But while doing that, the market became really flooded with cash like we've never seen before. So ironically, during a pandemic shutdown or slowdown, it allowed companies and businesses to expand and take on more, probably likely beyond more than what you even realized yourselves and your own expectations at a pace that we couldn't predict or foresee. But you fast forward into now, there's many deliberate measures in place to slow the economy. Fed just rose rates again yesterday. It came at us rather quickly. You talk about rising rates, little to no more government money coming out, emergency loans that are now back in repayment mode. It's causing a strain on some businesses and some industries. So, which if a looming recession does hit, it'll only become a little more painfully felt. For me personally, I try to keep it rather simple. I like to follow the housing market trends. My thought process is it's a key performance indicator to see how the economy is really doing. So simply put, if you can buy a house, you likely have a stable, good paying job with a little bit of money saved. And to me, they're both positive signs of a good, stable economy. Conversely, if you see, things slowing down or the housing market slow down or come to a halt, there's possibly larger things at play, not just simply interest rates, which always seems to grab the headlines.
Great, thank you all for that. The next question I'd like to dive into is the most recent CPI data, which suggests the potential that inflation is beginning to cool. While it's still maybe too early to say, is there any possibility of entering a deflationary environment? And what does that mean both for the wider economy, investors looking for opportunities, and how your organizations are preparing for that future?
So let me set the stage with that. So Bureau of Labor Statistics, which comes out monthly, just take this in, is 8 categories and 200 broad items. So it's a different number every single month on a year-over-year basis. So what was going on a month ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago is constantly evolving. So bear that in mind right as your backdrop. It's not a secret that everyone that goes into the grocery store and buys a dozen eggs and figures out that they're $6 a dozen, that affects everybody, whether you've got $5 in your pocket or 5 million in your pocket. It affects everybody. So our view is this process is going to be longer than people expect. There's going to be a permanency to it. There's some things that the Federal Reserve can't influence. A year ago, if we sat here, the Ukraine didn't know they were going to get invaded by Russia. A year ago, they didn't know. You can't influence that, right? So the Fed has some limited activity. So our view is inflation is going to stick around a little longer than people expect and be a little more uncomfortable than people think.
Yeah, and on the note of inflation, inflation has some pretty disruptive power to it, right? I mean, if you think about how it impacts people differently. I was reading an article yesterday in the journal, something like 1.7% of households that make $100,000 or more have monthly expenses that exceed their income, right? So if you think about what that means at the $100,000 level, but then we take it down to the $50,000 level, it's something like 7.5% of those households have expenses that exceed income. That's directly correlated to inflation and the destructive power that it has. I think that is really why you have to get inflation under control. It can really destroy economies. just to touch on something Greg said before around the housing market. You know, I think people are looking around saying, hey, the housing market, there's nothing selling, there's nothing moving. And for the most part, that's not, and that's a fairly accurate statement. But what we did see in the fourth quarter of last year and even into this year, that we see that home prices have moved, right? Home prices were actually up 6% in the fourth quarter of last year. So that's saying that these weird anomalies are happening where interest rates are higher, home prices are holding, there's no inventory on the market, and people that have homes aren't inclined to sell them because of the rates that they're in now. So it's really an interesting thing, and I think Albert's right in that that may persist longer than you think it is, just given what those dynamics, given what those market indicators are.
So my phone was ringing, so I don't, either that was groundhog or that's more rates rising, I don't know. But I thought people knew I was at this event, but I guess not. But I know for me personally, I'll speak personally, right? We're all, not only are we all in the business community, but we're all, you know, we all have a family and we're all personal consumers ourselves. You know, this CPI thing, you know, we're feeling the pain in my home, quite frankly. You know, my son likes to eat 2 dozen eggs at every meal, it seems like. But from the latest I read, it's up 6.5% over 12 months. Food, clothing, utilities, taxes, insurance. Every time I open up a bill, it's just another increase. My water bill is just ridiculous. And they're up significantly, and the costs of goods, they're up for many reasons. We talked about inflation. You know, the businesses, when they borrow, they pass it on to the consumer. There's a higher cost of labor, all that stuff. The supply, it's remaining low, and the demand is still high, which is very interesting to me. That many people are very comfortable going into either credit card debt or they're comfortable living beyond their means, which at some point, you know, that has to change. I do think maybe with some cooling on interest rates, we could see a CPI level off. I'm not bullish on that, anything deflationary in 2023 anytime soon. But so I would say for those of you in the room that are thinking of planning for the future or seeking your next deal, I think it's going to require really honest forecasting, conservative forecasting on the expense load side to really make sure the deal you're about to enter into, it's going to net you the net desired ROI. You know, and that could be for simply buying a piece of real estate. It could also be for adding another employee. You know, for me, is it a good point in time to add another asset, or should you work on your efficiency ratios and make sure that you're getting everything out of your current assets that you can? I think there are questions you need to ask yourself.
Thank you, Greg, George, and Al. The next question I have does tie in very well. It's geared towards George, but if anyone else would like to jump in, please feel free to do so. Americans have, for the most part, burnt through a lot of their pandemic savings, as we've highlighted with inflation. While the impact of rates may draw headlines, there are benefits for those who save and hold on to cash. How does the current rate environment benefit those holding on to their money? And is there a possibility that we see a shift from spending to saving?
Yeah, unfortunately, now you're seeing the opposite of that. So the premise that that households have burned through their savings, it may or may not be right. You know, if you measure that in terms of bank deposits, right? Bank deposits as a whole in the system, or something like during the height of the pandemic, were something like 19.6 trillion. That's pulled down to 19.3 trillion, but it's still way above pre-pandemic level. So there's still savings out there. The savings rate is lower. The savings rate during the pandemic, when people were home, reached as high as 30%, right? That's down to 3%, but households still have dollars. But for the folks that have dollars, what does it mean in this rate environment? Of course, they earn higher rates on their dollar. But what it really means is the ability to continue lifestyle through this inflationary period that we're experiencing, right? I think what we all know is that as prices continue and the savings rate continues to decline, what you're going to see is impacts in discretionary spending, right? You're going to see impacts in hospitality. You're going to see impacts, restaurants, marinas, anything that's discretionary. You're going to see some impact. That's generally the first thing that goes. But I'm a little bit more bullish on the U.S. consumer, especially because of what we see in the jobs market, especially because there's still a positive savings rate. I just think there's a lot of pluses there. The interesting thing is that when you look at households, as unemployment or news of unemployment begins to tick up, household savings actually increase, right? Because the idea is that if I can walk out tomorrow and get another job, I don't have to save for a rainy day fund. But these headline news that you hear around job openings and things create the incentive to begin saving. And just one more point on job openings. I think we've all seen a lot of headline news, Microsoft is laying off 120,000 people. But if you look at the number of layoffs in total over a longer period of time, it's not really abnormally high. The market continues to be resilient, and that says a lot about consumers and their ability to continue to do things in this market today. So,
Okay, thank you. Greg, Al, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think he put it well.
Perfect. The next question I have is more directed towards Al. At the end of 2022, the journal noted that classic 60-40 mix of stocks and bonds was had taken a toll in 2022. So what I was hoping to ask is, where do you look for the most strategic returns? And how do you keep clients focused when it seems headlines would rather focus on the market's current downside rather than opportunities?
All right, so that's a lot. Let me unpack that. I can do that in the next 3 hours.
We have 3 minutes.
So here's the backdrop to this, right? You saw the most difficult bond market in history in the last 40 years. When interest rates rise, it puts pressure on stock prices. Stock prices, the more overvalued they were, the more aggressively they corrected. So this is all yesterday's news. This is all last year's narrative. So traditionally thinking, you go into a year with a balanced portfolio and you would feel, keyword feel, I'm going to be protected. Well, not the case when interest rates are rising. You can't fight the Fed. So last year's environment was literally a nowhere to hide environment, with good guidance, with good financial planning, focusing on long-term goals and objectives, making sure you keep your spending in line with your earnings, in line with your longer-term goals. You can navigate through this. But that's an easy thing to say. It's a much harder thing to do. And people love, especially the media, to talk about what you should have done as opposed to being preemptive. So the media is our friend in some regards, and in some regards, not our friend, because they drive emotion, they drive headlines, and they talk about things that are super easy to do. Pick the area you need to be in now to avoid this. Really easy to say, almost virtually impossible to do. And forecasts are just that. They're just predictions. So after 30 years of doing what I'm doing, there are no special places to hide. There are no secret tricks. There are no gimmicks. You have to have a long-term disciplined plan and execute on that plan and not follow after the news nugget of the day or the headline of the day. There are no easy ways to do it. And I would just conclude this piece of it with, when someone says, well, this time it's different, it's never different. It's always the same. The set of circumstances are different, but the repeatability, the fact pattern is identical. In this environment too shall pass. It'll pass. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Al. Greg, George, is there anything you'd like to add? If not, we could go on to a question actually geared towards you, George, looking more over the South Jersey landscape. I'm sorry, Greg, my bad.
George, Greg.
My apologies. So as the Senior Vice President for Commercial Lending at TD Bank, when you specifically look across the South Jersey business landscape, where do you see the greatest opportunities for companies to leverage today's market into potential gains, and how can local banks help facilitate that growth across the region?
So again, a lot to unpack in 3 minutes. So to be honest with you, I think this question could be answered in a lot of different directions. You could look at diversifying your portfolio, go into more equity versus debt strategy. Perhaps you could, look at maybe picking up a weaker competitor if all things were to align properly and line up for you in the right way. That being said, the feeling that I have, the way that 2023 is going to remain a challenging operating environment. I personally think, when I'm talking to my clients, the best thing for them to do at this time is focus on their current operations and their current assets. Talk about focusing on stabilizing and strengthening your current infrastructure. Unless some kind of deal falls into your lap that you just cannot pass up. I mentioned a little bit earlier, improving your efficiency ratios. Make sure all the assets that you do have, the employees that you have, they're netting you the return that you require. Many of us in this room have employees that we can say, what are they doing all day? I'd also say, but with that said, I would say take time to invest in your people. For me and my team, employee turnover, it's a massive and wasteful, inefficient expense. commit to developing your people, retaining them, and which is going to help attract new talent. We've seen through the pandemic, happy, fulfilled, and engaged employees are the lifeblood of any successful organization. I know the previous panel talked about it. So you should make sure you're definitely investing in your people if that's one walk away from today. We all know that there's a worker revolution going on right now. And quite frankly, by many studies I've read, some of my colleagues are here, Chantal Capitacasa, that runs Burlington and Camden. We were at a seminar back in December in Orlando. And, this worker revolution comes in many shapes and forms, a lot of it through retirement as well. The studies that show the baby boomers that are leaving the workforce in the next 1 to 2 years with the workforce that's coming out of colleges, just smaller families have taken place in the United States. The numbers just aren't there. So when I say invest in your current people today, make sure that they're happy, make sure that they're part of your culture and your organization, because I think investing in your employees in good times and bad will come through. And again, there will be more of a shortage coming out. You asked how a banker can play the role. Personally, for me, I think it's multifaceted. Your bank can provide you working capital lines for payroll. They can work with you with treasury solutions and how money moves in and out of the business, speed up your receivables, maybe slow down your payables, maximize your cash flow, and hire some top talent. But I think one of the roles that a banker needs to play is also being in the community. So if you own a manufacturing company or a professional services company, I would say make sure that you're connected to your banker, because they should be connected to other people, whether through social media or events like this, and they can connect you maybe to your next, star employee.
Thank you for that, Greg. I would like to follow up just in regards to that, the need to invest in your people. Is there anything that you can speak to from a banking or wealth management side, just in terms of strategizing to recruit new talent into the industry, understanding that every industry is trying to do the same thing, from healthcare to a manufacturing to construction trades and everything in between. It seems that there's a lot of competition in the market. So how does banking or the wealth management piece stand out?
We face this. We have openings at our organization. The pandemic changed everything. So, what my foundation of work beliefs are is maybe not what the new generation is or the next coming generation is. You need to be open-minded, need to listen rather than talk. So I think that's the greatest thing. Go into a conversation open-minded. I think what the pandemic at least taught me from a people manager standpoint, taught me to be a little bit more emotionally intelligent. Everybody has a pandemic story, and you need to be open-minded to that. If somebody can figure out a way, I haven't done it, but if somebody can figure out a way to, hit their performance metrics and their goals in a 3-hour work day from the beach, so be it. I haven't figured it out. I hope they would share it with me, but I recognize a lot of production was done, a lot of business was done during the pandemic in a very alternative way. So I need to be open-minded as the people manager. So for me, I would say, put your biases aside and your own personal beliefs and at least listen.
Great. Thanks, Greg. George, Al, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, it's no longer a reactive game hiring people, right? You got to be very proactive about it. So companies now have done a good job investing in proactive marketing to attract people. So Ocean First, for example, we launched a program last year called an EDGE program, right? And the EDGE program is designed to go out in the communities and pull people into the organization. We launched that last year. We had five candidates. We're doing it this year with 25 candidates, right? Because we have to go out, and that's a management development program. So when we're out talking to clients, they're out saying the same thing, right? That of course, pay is certainly important, but it's really lower on the scale than reinvestment in your employees, right? It's about the ability to invest in them, educate, manage, develop talent, and that's how you're winning talent and retaining talent. Certainly, the work from home thing weighs into everybody's equation today, but there's less and less of that, right? We see companies pulling people back to work. It's actually interesting. There's a company called Castle. Castle measures the number of swipes in office buildings, particularly in metro areas. And for the first time last month, Castle measured over 50% occupancy in buildings. So people are coming back. That work from home thing is still here. It's still real. It's still a recruitment challenge. But hopefully companies are starting to get more and more people back into offices, because you need it. You need it for collaboration. You need it for mentoring. You need it for bringing the next generation up and transferring that talent and that education to folks that may be leaving the work of course, you need to be able to transfer that to the next generation. So it's a combination of all the above.
I would only add what I started with was 10 years of progress in 2 years. So, you know, we're a big firm. Morgan Stanley is a big firm, but we have a small team of 14 people. So I think what we did a really good job of was figuring out what people needed and what people wanted, and coming together and figuring out how can we all collaborate and be most effective. So I agree with, if you can do it in 3 hours, not 8, you should do it in 3 hours. I also think that the educators that were up here earlier said some things that were really important takeaways that I think, you know, I took a few notes from, but we have to tell the education system what it is employers need so they can help connect those bridges. And that's, again, one of those easy to say things and really, really hard to do things. We've had deep embedded relationships, especially with Rutgers Camden, through developing young people and internships. And we tend to find that the best way to find new people is just continuously talk about your value added proposition and that you're looking for people, because you never know where that next human being actually can come from. But I think everybody in this room faces the challenge of, we all want more people. We all need more people. And that challenge isn't going away. One little dovetail off of that, this goes back to the Federal Reserve. No one wants to talk about the 5 million service sector workers that are not coming back to the economy, right? So we have all these job openings, but we don't have people that are coming back for them. And until we address that gap, you talked about that. We're all reading the same sheet of music, trying to figure it out. So they're my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. And back to George's notion of needing to be more proactive rather than reactionary. I did want to get a gauge for what the future might look like for you and your clients and how you plan to navigate the next 12 to 18 months. Noting that no one has a crystal ball, of course, but it's still important to game plan. And I'm just curious how your organizations have been doing as such.
So I look at it through the eyes of our the clients, right? We're in a fortunate position, Greg and I, very similar, that we have the ability to go out and talk to companies within the community and listen to what they're telling us and use that as kind of a barometer. I'll kind of say the same thing I said before, where companies' balance sheets continue to be healthy, right? That means they're in a relatively decent position. The challenges that they're going to face as we get into this market is, as we continue to look forward to this next 12 months, is you see things, to Greg's point, like margin compression, where companies have been able to pass cost along to their customers for the last really 2 years, right? The cost increases, and you're all seeing it. That's all slowing down now, right? So there's going to be pressure on margins, which could make it a little bit more difficult for companies. But so they'll figure out other ways to make sure that the company remains healthy, right? They'll figure out investments in technology. I was out walking a warehouse at 80,000 square foot distribution center, and that company's moved to robotics for moving stuff in and out of orders, right? So instead of having someone pushing a cart, there's a robot that follows them down the aisle, right? So they figure out ways to get innovative to make sure that their company continues to stay sound. So, you know, I think for the most part, if people can maintain healthy balance sheets, maintain their employee base, and continue to innovate, and as Greg said, I don't want to step on him too much, but continue to create efficiencies, they'll be healthy and they'll get through the next. People will figure it out. They'll get through the next cycle.
Yeah, so I know we discussed this a lot. I won't add too much more. But, you know, reinforcing key factors, variables that I know we've said that they're just beyond our control. You know, they're including, but not limited to what are the rates going to do? Where the costs of goods are going to go? Will the supply chain get healthier? What's going to happen in Europe and China? How will the labor market shake out? Will unemployment remain strong? There's so many questions. And within that unemployment, will there be good jobs, accounted for in those numbers? And is a recession upon us? All those questions need to be carefully thought through and strategizing if you're owning a business or if you're looking to make your next move. For me, I think banks' responsibilities are to take a holistic approach when talking to you. We're not just lenders of money. My team in the room knows there's an old saying in banking, that's your lender, that's your lender. That drives me up a wall because we're not just lenders of money, we're bankers. We deal with cash management, we deal with deposits, we deal with loans. We don't just put money on the streets. If your banker can't talk to you about the movement of money in and out of your business, and what potential, money you could make and invest and build from an equity standpoint, then you don't really have a good commercial banker. I would say, lastly, if you're not meeting with your banker a couple times a year, or if they're not asking to meet with you to talk through, what your balance sheet looks like, what your AR, your AP, and all that looks like, you're probably not getting all the service that you should. So, make sure that you're taking, much like you would talk to your CPA quarterly, make sure you're talking to your banker at least quarterly to check on the health of your business.
Al, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so, for a change.
All right, well, if we could please give a round of applause to our panelists. Okay, thank you, everyone. At this point, we're nearing the end of the program. What we have is a video address from Representative Donald Norcross. And after that, we'll have our closing remarks from our Senior Executive Director.
Good morning, everyone. Congressman Don Norcross here. And thank you for coming out to celebrate South Jersey. As a lifelong resident, it's been remarkable seeing the progress we made together over the years. I don't have to remind you, it hasn't always been easy. The challenges we faced from the pandemic and its economic fallout have required tough decisions by all of us, but we came through it together. Through hard work, community engagement, and leadership from every level of government, we've come together to make South Jersey stronger and an economic engine for the state and the region. South Jersey's seen incredible growth. Just last week, Campbell Soup announced a $50 million expansion of its Camden headquarters, bringing back over 300 good jobs to our community. Those are good jobs, local jobs. That's great news. I know we'll see more progress as our federal investments reach our local economies. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is already putting billions of dollars into local projects that will make it easier and safer on our roads and highways. There'll be a much anticipated and much needed third lane coming to the Atlantic City Expressway to help end those horrible bottlenecks and long delays that we've experienced for years. In addition, the Turnpike is going to finish their expansion from Exit 4 all the way down to Delaware. Infrastructure is good for our safety and commerce, and it provides thousands of good paying jobs, local jobs. Investment in clean energy will not only be good for our environment and lowering costs for our families, but it's also an economic opportunity for our region. That's why we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which helps fund major energy projects and jumpstart a clean energy economy with South Jersey leading the way. The largest monopile manufacturing plant in the United States is being built right down the road in Paulsboro. This will help grow our offshore wind industry. The first New Jersey Transit electric bus will be coming out of the Camden Depot on our roads, connecting workers to jobs. And our federal investment in electric charging stations continue to be built throughout our communities. There's been great progress in building out this billion-dollar hydrogen hub for our region. This competition will bring good, clean hydrogen and the jobs right here to New Jersey. The Inflation Reduction Act also provides incentives to businesses to develop clean energy technology and manufacturing, and doubled the grants this year for small businesses. Through it all, we've laid a foundation for a brighter future and creating opportunities to realize the American dream. We still have more work to do, but I'm optimistic about our future, especially with leaders like you. South Jersey is fertile ground for established business to continue to grow, and certainly doors open for the new business. In just under 3 years, we're back to pre-pandemic job levels, and each of you have helped contribute to that. Thank you for being here, and it's an honor to serve you. Take care.
Let's give it all up for Donald Norcross for being our closing keynote speaker. Also like to give it up for all of our panelists today. Wow, what an event. Really excited to have everybody here, and what an amazing location. The DoubleTree Hilton Cherry Hill wanted to thank you all for coming and providing us with your great services. Let's give them another round of applause, please. Again, for everybody who I have not had the pleasure to meet, my name is Josh Greenberg, and I am the Senior Executive Director of Invest Philadelphia, of course, Invest Jersey, and Invest Pittsburgh. It's been great to have the chance to meet everybody here, and really wanted to thank you as we look to wrap up our latest edition of Invest South Jersey. Throughout this time, I've gained a great wealth of knowledge about this great region. I'd really also like to thank all of our great, amazing leaders that I've met during this journey. Your support and enthusiasm does not go unnoticed. We've really been blown away by what we've been able to create and accomplish, and I really can't wait to start working on next year's edition. I'd also like to mention we have a great, amazing audience with us today. It's not only a testament to the necessity of what we do now more than ever, business intelligence, to attract and promote investments and business to the South Jersey region, but it also speaks to the character of the business community, a community that leans in, rises above, and strives for more, and instills a rising tide lifts all boats mentality. Again, I'd like to thank our incredible sponsors for making today possible. Our gold sponsors, Ocean First Bank, Rowan College South Jersey, Samaritan. Our bronze sponsors, CLM Advisors, First Harvest Credit Union, DRBA, and our honored sponsors, Fox Pemberthy Den at Morgan Stanley and Rowan University. Again, thank you to the DoubleTree, Hilton Cherry Hill, and their incredible team for making today possible. As you leave, please make sure to grab your complimentary copy of our Invest South Jersey publication. Feedback is welcome. You can write to me directly at jgreenberg@capitalaa.com or contact@capitalaa.com. Last but not least, while Invest South Jersey may be newly released today, we have already started our updates to the Invest Philadelphia project. Please mark your calendars for those leadership summits. Once again, thank you all for joining us today, especially to our keynote speakers, Mayor Karstafen, Donald Norcross, and our presenters, moderators, and panelists for your insightful words, and our sponsors for supporting our efforts. Thank you and have a fantastic weekend, and go Birds.